Andy Mayberry, Terry Rice, John Burris, David Sanders, and David Meeks for coming. And on the Senate side, I'd like to thank Senator Hutchinson, Rayford, and Irvin for coming. I'm going to read a short statement, and then Representative Rice will make a short statement. Senator Hutchinson will make a statement, and then we will answer questions from the media. A few questions. For months now, some of us have hoped that the U.S. Supreme Court would rescue us from the political process. Today's decision is a wake-up call. It shows that the political decisions must be made not by courts, but by legislators and executives. As you know, I joined a lawsuit challenging Obamacare a year and a half ago. Like most Arkansans, I take issue with the government overtaxing us and over-regulating our lives. Today's decision shows that I was right. Our counsel was right to object that the law of interstate commerce didn't permit the mandate. However, most of us never dreamed that the Supreme Court would interpret Congress's power to tax in such a broad and unprecedented way. Like 70% of the citizens in our state, I remain concerned about the prospects for the people of Arkansas. The White House health care plan encourages employers to dump their employees into health exchanges. It significantly expands abortion funding, and it puts federal bureaucrats in charge of literally millions of decisions that should be confined to doctors and patients. Its immense cost endangers our economic health. The advocates of Obamacare believe they prevail today. When efforts were made in our state legislature last year to improve Obamacare, our Attorney General and other Democrat legislators were tireless advocates of leaving Obamacare alone. Today, I tell them the fight over this issue has only begun. In case the will of the people hasn't been cleared, their message will be solidified in November. My desire is for a new president and Congress who will repeal and replace this law, and state legislatures who will stand firm against it at their level. One ray of hope is the federal government cannot punish the states if they choose not to participate in this Medicaid expansion program. This decision underscores the fact that when Arkansas's political establishment said we had to grow government, they were wrong. What conservative legislators have been saying was right. We unnecessarily wasted millions of dollars starting these exchanges when we didn't have to. In addition, Arkansans were promised their taxes would not go up. Because of this law, clearly Obamacare is now nothing but a tax that forces people into a decision against their will. President Obama promised us that he would not raise taxes on the middle class. The Supreme Court has now revealed that our president is responsible for one of the largest middle-class tax increases in history. My first reaction this morning was disappointment. In fact, however, the court has put this issue back where it belongs, in the hands of the states. I pledge to continue to stand up for Arkansans, and together we can and will get government out of our lives and will bring real reform to our healthcare system. Today, I call on every elected official who serves in this Capitol, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, to publicly take a stand. While your vote on this issue will be reported next session, Arkansans deserve to know where you stand right now. Will you side with President Obama and continue to burden Arkansans, or will you join me and others in bringing real health care reform to our state? The line in the sand has been drawn, and now is the time for all conservatives to let Arkansas know what we plan to do. Conservatives in Arkansas now have a chance to reform the Patient Protection Act so that it's better for patients, for doctors, and for our country. I hope that this decision will encourage them to do so. We have the power to make our healthcare system better. There is no doubt that it is sick and needs reform. At the federal level, we need to encourage our lawmakers to repeal and replace this bill. At the state level, we need to work to expand the choice in insurance providers, give medical professionals more freedom to practice medicine, and make sure we provide for the truly needy and deter frivolous healthcare lawsuits. To the people of Arkansas, I say this: I heard your concerns and I stood with you. And today, I continue standing with you, and together we will win the battle. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Rice for a statement.
Good afternoon. It's good to be with you. Our House Republican leader, Representative Bruce Western, is out of state, and I will read a press release and make a statement. Today's Supreme Court ruling says that Obamacare is constitutional, but it doesn't say that it's good public policy. Putting the government between you and your doctor may be constitutional for the court, but that does not mean it's a good idea. Today's decision presents a choice to the people of Arkansas. Do you agree with the health care law of President Obama that increases taxes on the middle class and hurts our Arkansas workers by making it harder for small businesses to create jobs? Or do you agree with conservatives who are fighting for the hardworking taxpayers at every level of government? The lack of fight by some in state government on behalf of Arkansans should illustrate who is committed to our people and who is committed to their party. My personal statement is we serve the people. It is now up to the voters of Arkansas to decide what they want. And I appeal to the people of Arkansas and the people of America to speak up. We are at a critical time in our history, and I truly believe that this is one of the most important issues that we have faced. And again, healthcare needs reform. I urge my colleagues from both sides of the aisle to take a stand and let the people know where they stand, and let the people decide. This is a too important issue to try to hide. Stand up and speak up. Thank you.
Senator Hutchinson will come represent the Senate, and he's prepared to say.
Thank you, Governor Dar. I was also disappointed as I watched television coverage of today's Supreme Court proceedings. For months now, or even longer than that, almost a year and a half now, conservatives in the legislature have been questioning the validity of this law and have been encouraging state agency directors to slow down, because we advocated and argued that this was an encroachment on the legitimate Commerce Clause authority granted to Congress. We were right. It was indeed found today to be in violation of the Commerce Clause. However, despite the administration passing this legislation and campaigning for this legislation on the basis that it is not a tax, and President Obama stated clearly on many occasions this was not a tax, they now today embrace it as a tax and are heralding the decision by the court. It is constitutional, and we respect the will of the Supreme Court. The frustrating thing is that this tax, unlike any other tax in American history, most taxes you're taxed either because of income or because of activity. You decide to purchase something, or you invest, or you buy a home, you buy property or something. This tax is not broad-based. It is not spread out across the population as a whole. It selects a few people and taxes them only for their mere existence. They've done nothing. They choose to participate in nothing. They choose to not participate in any type of commerce, and yet they're taxed because they are here and exist. That, I believe, the American people will not stand for. It may pass legal muster with the Supreme Court, but I don't think it passes the smell test for the American people that this is fair or equitable. And it's certainly not what was promised to them when this bill was passed. The interesting thing about the opinion, and I've read all of it, is toward the end, where they say that the federal government cannot impose a Medicaid expansion on states. that leaves this battle now here in this capital and in capitals across all 50 states. I'm of the opinion that if there's not enough states who have voluntarily now agreed to pay for a significant Medicaid expansion, then the whole scheme begins to fall apart. What happens? We're raising Medicaid eligibility in Arkansas up to 133 or 138% of poverty. We have a $250 to $400 million shortfall right now in Medicaid. If we don't have the money to expand that coverage, what happens to those people within this grand Obamacare scheme? I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think that answer is known yet. I know there's been reports from governors all across the country who said they're not going to, they're financially strapped and they're not going to voluntarily expand their Medicaid coverage. What if there's a majority of the states who don't do it? Are those people taxed because they don't have insurance? Are they given a rebate? Where does that money come from to rebate all these people now? It opens up a whole lot of questions that I think we as legislators need to get the answer to before we move forward. I know we've had reports coming from state agency heads who say onward and forward, let's move forward, but I think that's the wrong approach. I think has more questions to be answered now than before today's ruling, and it's incumbent on us as legislators and as protectors of the taxpayer to get answers to those questions before we do anything. I think it's also important to wait and see what other states do. We don't want to be the only state that voluntarily agrees to Medicaid expansion, and nobody else, or very few other states do, and the system collapses under the weight of its own financial burdens, and we're left having expanded Medicaid with no benefits from the federal government because the system as a whole is not sustainable. So it was a disappointing day in many regards, but it is exciting, I think, for this debate now to move to the state houses and to the local governments where we, I hope, have the ear of our constituents more so than those people in Washington who just by the sheer fact that they represent a lot more people aren't able to adhere to their concerns of their constituents as much. It'll be an interesting session. It'll be an interesting election here in Arkansas. No longer can state legislative candidates say, well, that's a federal issue, and I'm not going to take an opinion, not going to take a position on it. It's now our issue. It's a state issue. And there won't be any more hiding. There won't be any more obfuscating. There's going to have to be your real opinions flushed out during this election process. And then next session, there will be a healthy and important debate occur on the direction that Arkansas is going to play in the overall grand scheme of Obamacare. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll open it up for a few questions for a few minutes for me or for any of the state reps or state senators. I'd be glad to take questions.
Commissioner Bradford said that, and he had said before the ruling that if it was upheld, the state was already moving forward with the partnership model of the exchange. Aiming more toward legislators, what do you all plan on doing if you come close before you for any of the other contracts on it? It's going to be any type of contract.
Well, I can't speak for every legislator, but I've been in contact with most of the Republican senators, and I can tell you our concern still exists. I'll grant you that Commissioner Bradford is correct that one major concern is alleviated. It was ruled to be constitutional, and that was certainly a major concern of ours. But in so doing, it's raised 100 more questions to be answered before we move forward. So I appreciate Commissioner Bradford. He's been a very straight shooter at committee. We may disagree on policy, but he'll come with real numbers and give you the real skinny, and we're going to have a lot of other questions from him. And probably we're going to need to talk to the federal Department of Health and Human Services and get questions about what impact does it have if states don't, a lot of states don't implement the exchange or agree to Medicaid expansion. How does that impact if 26 states don't do it, 28 states don't do it? I don't think Arkansas, now that it's back in our we've got discretion over what to do. I don't think we ought to be the first ones to jump out there and do anything until we get a consensus of what the trend is nationally and what the impact is nationally. The majority of the states choose not to participate. And I believe that's going to be the likelihood. When you look at all the state budget shortfalls, Arkansas is blessed. You look at some of the big states, even run by Democrat governors, California, Illinois, New York, asking them, and when they've got billion-dollar deficits, to voluntarily spend more money. I suspect you may see a lot of states choose not to do that at this time. So I appreciate his enthusiasm, and he is correct that we've removed one barrier, but unfortunately, in the course of doing that, I think we've raised a lot more questions that need to be answered before we're prepared to move forward. Now, I'll let any of my colleagues answer that.
I may have misunderstood what you said.
No.
When you ran for lieutenant governor, you said you're going to challenge the constitutionality
Right.
of what you call the law.
Mm-hmm.
The Supreme Court ruled constitutional, but you said you were right. Did you lose? Or am I misunderstanding what you're saying?
Well, the constitutionality was upheld. However, we were sold on the idea that this was not a tax. And so this is a tax. It goes back to the state, which is where, if you have socialized medicine, regardless if it's on the federal level or on the state level, it's the state's rights to do that. And so it actually brings it, we are right, because it brings it back to the states to be in charge of their health.
So you didn't lose today?
What's that?
You didn't lose today?
Well, I think that we didn't lose because the battle still goes on. I mean, did it turn out the way that I wanted it to? No, it didn't. But it brings it back to the legislators. It allows them to be put on record, and it violates the current commerce laws.
So, just to make clear, when you guys or folks talk about wanting people to take a stand, what happens if, or is anybody suggesting that we should apply the federal government?
I'm personally saying, I mean, each legislator can speak for themselves. I'm saying that our state should not comply with that. Because one, that's going to be our state right to do so. We can opt out. And so my opinion would be for us to not comply with it, to not collect that tax and raise tax on our citizens. Yes?
Yes, apologize for running battery issues, but could you state your first plan of action after this decision?
Well, I think one is kind of up to y'all. It's up to whether or not you see every person that's running for elected office in Arkansas if federal issues relate to state. In this case, we see that it does. And so I think every state legislator, every person that runs for executive office or a constitutional office should be put on record of how they feel. How are they going to handle this going forward?
So you're saying that the state should not participate in expanding Medicaid, but what about the other parts like the insurance exchange? Should the state provide federal government on the insurance exchange?
Well, we see today that we spent, and many of the people who are standing here today tried to block that, and they successfully blocked it during session. However, the insurance exchange has been able to get the ball rolling on that, and our state is spending millions of dollars unnecessarily. And so we can see that by this ruling that if they cannot force us to participate, that was a waste of money, a waste of taxpayer dollars.
In response to a good portion, a good reason for the exchange existence is for Medicaid expansion. People would go on to an exchange and determine their eligibility. If we're not going to participate in the Medicaid expansion, then is there a need for an exchange? Private insurers, there can be also, we're all for some type of marketplace where people can go and shop for private insurers. That doesn't require a government-run exchange to do that. So I don't know the answer to your question, to be honest with you, but the point is we have questions that we don't know the answer to, and we've got to get them answered before we're going to agree. Now, we're a minority, so they can continue on as they have so far, and all we can do is ask questions. But we hope that given the fact that the Supreme